You're listening to the Becoming a Star podcast, where we interview athletes, coaches, GMs, and others in the sports industry about their career and what it takes to make it to the highest levels.
And shot, score! He scored! 2.1 remaining. Can you believe it?
We're very excited to be joined by our first goalie guest today. Goalies are people too. I'm a goalie, so I appreciate you coming on. He's from Owen Sound, Ontario, Canada. Played juniors in the OHL for Owen Sound. Signed in the NHL as an undrafted free agent. Played in the ECHL and AHL before debuting with the St. Louis Blues in the 2002-2003 season. Went on to play 144 NHL games and over 500 professional games. Excited to welcome in Curtis Sanford today.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to chatting.
Absolutely. So I guess, we were just talking about it a little bit, but life's kind of been crazy with the pandemic going on the past couple months. It's kind of shifted everyone's life a little bit. So what have things kind of been like for you? And I know you're in kind of a player development role with the Canucks organization. What's that kind of been like from an off-ice standpoint now?
Well, yeah, it kind of became full stop there in the middle of March. So at that point, I was doing my duties down in Utica in the American League and spending time with the goalies down there and the team and the coaches. And when it became full stop, so obviously, I just wanted to kind of get out of Utica, get back to my home in Ontario with my family. And have basically been here ever since. Obviously, there hasn't been too much to do besides, staying in contact with the staff and with the goalies, Mike DiPietro, Jake Kiley, Richard Bachman, during this kind of, pause and downtime and now cancellation of the, American Hockey League season. So, there hasn't been a lot to do, but still trying to stay involved and put a positive spin on these young players' lives while I can and as much as I can with my own family here and making sure that our boys are getting what they need education wise and as much comfort as we can bring them in this time as well.
Absolutely. So what is your role like as a kind of from the player development side with the goalies?
So a typical month of mine would be, I'm spending about half of each month down in Utica with our goalies and in the American Hockey League team. So, I spend a lot of time with Michael DiPietro this past season. Obviously, Jake Kiley is another name I mentioned, Richard Bachman, and for, up until the trade deadline, Zane McIntyre. And so what I do is we kind of develop a plan of progress for their seasons and stuff that they can work on and work with them on during the season to, help them achieve the goals that they want to achieve in their playing careers. And obviously that's the play in the highest level, and that's the play in the NHL. So, I try and use, my experiences as a player and try and be a soundboard for them, as they kind of take their journey and their steps through their playing career.
All right, that's awesome. And obviously, the Vancouver system has a few good young goalies coming out. I'm familiar with Thatcher Demko because he played here in Omaha for a year, so it's cool to see him kind of making his way through. But like you said, DiPietro, Bachman, a little bit older, but he was a good goalie is a good goalie for quite some time as well. So you're the first goalie on our podcast. Obviously, you had to learn to skate before you played goalie, as any goalie does. But when did you start playing goalie and say kind of, hey, I kind of like this. This is what I want to do?
Yeah, it's a great question, Nick. I started out as a player, as I think, everybody does. No one ever just jumps right into being goalie. And, you want to get out there, you want to skate, you want to take shots, you want to score goals. And I had a lot of fun doing that. When I started to get interested in goaltending, my parents, my family we're a billet family for the junior B team here in Owen Sound, the Owen Sound Rays. And it just so happened we were able to billet a goalie, actually 2 goalies. So back to back, we had goalies. And, I really took a shining as a, young, impressionable hockey player, 8, 9 years old, having a goalie live with us. It was a big deal. So getting to go and watch him on Friday nights play at the rink and knowing that he was going to be coming home and he was living at our house was really cool.
Right.
So just watching him, sparked my interest a lot, and I gave it a go. And obviously, once you have success, if you have success in your first go around, it makes a big deal.
For sure.
And I had a really good experience my first go around, and it really sold me on the position, and I didn't change after that, but I'm glad that I was able to go out, experience playing out, scoring goals, skating up and down the rink. But I really took a liking to goaltending when I first started. So it was that first initial start. If it had have blown up in my face, I'm probably sure I would have aborted mission right then, but it was a good experience. So I stuck with it.
That's good. Yeah. Like you said, first experience is everything. I always loved the goalie position. I played it outside a lot growing up, not necessarily on the ice. I don't know why. I guess I just liked people shooting pucks at me for whatever reason. But you mentioned billeting goalies and, being at home. You got to play juniors at home, which is pretty special. A lot of kids, 15, 16, 17, are moving across the country or even across the world to play juniors. So what was it like to get to stay at home and play your juniors?
Well, to play junior, especially major junior A in your own home city, I think is a big deal for anybody that gets the opportunity to do that. I had lived away from home the year prior to my draft. I was playing, about an hour away, a little less than an hour away in Collingwood, Ontario, Tier 2. And so I had that taste of living away from home. But when you're drafted and you get that opportunity, I remember it was the team that I grew up watching. We had billeted players that played on that team. So they were my hometown team. I was a massive fan, and I was in the community, in a small community, the people that were going to the games, very, personal. And it was a great deal for me to be able to throw on the jersey, and, you get your jitters because you're excited to play well for your neighbors, essentially. And so it was a big deal, and I loved every minute of it. And I was able to spend 4 years playing in Owen Sound in my hometown. And, it's an experience that I'll never forget. And it's one that, you hope more people could actually go through.
Absolutely. You kind of mentioned pressure. Did you feel as if you had more pressure playing for your hometown team as if maybe you weren't?
Oh, absolutely. But I think it's always good pressure. I think there's a certain amount of pressure that, that keeps you on your toes. And I think that's the great thing that comes with the position of goaltending, especially, is you're out there. You're the last guy. Everyone knows when you make a mistake. But at the same time, you always play a huge role in the outcome of every game, whether it's good or bad, and that's the responsibility of the goaltender. And and that's one thing that taught me was, there's always going to be pressure. You're always going to have pressure on yourself. There's always going to be pressure of the fans, but I think that's what made it more exciting, was knowing that, your neighbors were counting on you to play well, and they would let you know when you didn't and when you did. So, and I see them walking around the streets now, and there's a lot of fond memories, and, they bring up good memories. They bring up the memories that you want to forget as well, but they keep you honest, and it's something that you own and that you're responsible for.
Right. I can only imagine, like I said, I grew up here going to Omaha Lancers games, never made it to anywhere close to that high of a level, obviously, but I can only imagine just the honor it is to wear your hometown team that you grew up idolizing, because that's really what it is, especially for like smaller towns. I mean, Omaha now has a college team too, but back when only had the junior team. So, you know, anyone who watched hockey, like that was their team, which I'm sure is the same for you guys in maybe a smaller area too.
Yeah, absolutely. Ever since I could remember, even as a spectator, the Owen Sound Players, the Owen Sound Attack, they played their home games on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So you know what everybody was doing on Wednesday and Saturday, because it's such a small community. It's a tight-knit community. And I think there's that excitement that comes with being in a smaller community, and everyone knows what's going on. Everybody knows what each other's doing. But, you know, I think it adds for a lot of fun. It adds for a lot of excitement, and adds for a lot of things to talk about.
Absolutely. So you weren't drafted into the NHL, but as we both know, a draft is really just numbers and doesn't mean that much when you're a young developing player, because obviously you see undrafted players make it all the time. You see first round draft picks barely or never play in the NHL. So it still takes a lot of hard work to make it. So being passed on, did you feel some extra motivation, and what was it like to sign your first contract?
Absolutely. It was a lot of motivation. You know, I remember going to the draft in Boston, and it was my second time going through the draft, and had a pretty good year. You know, Owen Sound played a lot of games. We had a good run in the playoffs. You know, numbers are skewed back then because, you know, I never had a goalie coach. You know, you had a goalie coach, you know, that showed up maybe, you know, once a month type of thing. So you're out there, you're trying to do what you thought was right, but maybe it wasn't right all the time, and you're just kind of playing by feel. Right. But that's, you know, that's another story. But yes, there's a lot of motivation. You know, you're passed over, and, you know, you start to second guess. And then coming back from my overage year, you know, we had a young team. I had to shoulder a lot more responsibility. We had a lot of older players that moved on into pro or moved on with their careers after their junior careers. So, you know, there's a lot more responsibility to shoulder. It was a young team. We weren't, there's going to be growing pains. There were some particularly long nights at times, but, you know, I think it was another really good learning experience, you know, and having to battle and having to grow leadership wise and responsibility wise. I thought that was my best year. And, you know, it wasn't great statistics wise or anything like that, but growth wise, it was huge. And coming out of that season, I'm starting to, you know, pore over, okay, what universities am I going to apply to in Canada? And not even thinking that maybe professional hockey was in it for me at that point in time. You know, and then I got a call from a guy named Mark Reeds, bless, you know, rest his soul. And he invited me to come down and play some UHL games at the conclusion of my last OHL year. And, you know, the team was based out of, you know, St. Louis, actually St. Charles, Missouri, the Missouri River Otters. Went down there, played a handful of games, and, you know, played well. And, you know, obviously Mark being a St. Louis Blues alumni, I don't know if he said anything or to anybody or anything like that, but, you know, I just so happened to be able to get a tryout with the Blues and went to rookie camp, and, you know, I guess played well enough to get invited to the main camp there. And out of main camp, I signed my first contract. So, you know, things happen quickly. You know, you're thinking one thing and then you're preparing for another. And, you know, I think that was the big thing. I was always preparing for something. And, you know, I think a lot of hard work had to go into it. A lot of, you know, sticking to things and sticking to it and being really diligent about what I wanted to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, you know, as an undrafted player in any league, you see players go one of two directions. They either get down on themselves and it goes south pretty quick, or it's added motivation. It makes it that much better, like it did for you. So it took you a couple of years before you made your NHL debut after coming into the AHL and ECHL. I believe you had like a 23 save victory, if I read my stats correctly, in your debut game. What do you remember most about that game?
Well, I remember, getting the call up. I think we just gotten back from a road trip up in Winnipeg. I was with the Worcester Ice Cats at the time. And I wasn't particularly playing all that well, actually. But I think I was the next guy up on the depth chart. So, you get the call and you hope you're prepared, and you don't know what to feel except, excitement and, nervousness in a good way. But getting up there, it was a really good team. And there were some, excellent hockey players on it. And sitting on the bench and seeing the starting goalie Reinhard Divas go down at near the end of the first period, and it's just like, oh, he's not just hurt, he's injured, and he's in pain. And so you just start to put yourself in game mode and get out there and try and feel as calm and as confident as possible. And I think the team really rallied around the fact that, there was a young guy in there, first time in there, coming in relief. They played extremely well, put up a bunch of goals, and went away with the victory. So, it set me up for my first start, obviously, against the Dallas Stars. And, once again, well insulated, but, you still have to put in the work and be prepared and be ready to do your job as well. But, there's a lot of great players that made it really easy for me.
So you mentioned getting the call up. I've heard a couple different interesting call up stories. So I'm curious what yours was like at the time.
Well, it was really a whirlwind because, like I said, it was we were in Worcester, Massachusetts, and we had just flown out to Winnipeg, playing the Manitoba Moose, for a back-to-backer, and then you're flying back to Worcester, and literally, I think I basically landed in Worcester, and right away I was on my way to St. Louis. You just want to get to where you're going without making any mistakes or forgetting something, and you hope you're not missing a flight or leaving something behind. But when I got to St. Louis, everything was in order, and they make you feel, so welcome and so at home, and anything to ease your mind to get you focused on what you got to do, and that's just play hockey.
Right. Did your family make the trip to St. Louis to see your debut game, or since you didn't know you were going to be playing, did they even come to the game, or what was that like?
No, I was, that game against Columbus, it was, I thought it was going to be a quick call up, in and out type of thing, one game, maybe two, and you're gone back to the minors. But, when the injury happened, I knew I was probably going to get a few starts in a row, but no, they didn't make it down. My wife actually made it into St. Louis, and got to watch me play, my first start against Dallas, and then she was there to watch my first shutout against the Minnesota Wild. So it was pretty cool.
That's pretty sweet. So you went on to play another 143 NHL games after that first one, and over 500 total professional games. What are some of the challenges you faced throughout your career as a player that really had to fight to prove your worth, that you were an NHL caliber goalie?
I think it's a fight you fight every day. I really do. I think, back then you're the first couple of years, you're just fighting to survive. You're just fighting to show that you belong and playing professional hockey. It doesn't even matter if it's the East Coast League, American League, or NHL. The end goal is to play in the NHL, obviously, but really you're just fighting to survive and make a name and show that you belong. Starting out in the East Coast League, I think St. Louis had they had a plan with me, which was really good. And they weren't going to rush it. They were going to stick to it and not put me in a position where, I was going to be set up to fail, so to speak. So, I started in the East Coast League, had some call-ups in the American League, and really did the slow burn, making my way through. So, that I wasn't going to be put into, a situation that, was out of my scope at that point in time. So getting some starts here and there in the American League to get me acclimated. And then when I was able to make the jump, it was seamless, and, it was in my mind, I knew I was ready for it and it wasn't rushed. So I think that was the big thing. But, as far as times where that are tougher, I think you got to be responsible and own what you do every day, and not waste it, and be as prepared and be as diligent in going about your business, but at the same time enjoying it, because it doesn't last forever.
Right. Yeah, I think obviously goalies are different than players. Goalies get made fun of a lot for some of the different things they do. What are some of the ways that you prepare leading up to a game, before a game, even during the game, to just stay ready and focused?
Well, I think having a couple different routines works. Obviously, something that I do on a game day isn't necessarily what I would do on a practice day, because I don't want to be someone that was going to the mental well every day. I wanted to stay fresh mentally. I wanted to stay fresh physically. But as my career progressed, you learn how to do things a little bit smarter, I would say. So you can preserve energy when you can, and be able to kind of turn it on and turn it off a little easier. For instance, when I first broke in the league, it wasn't really about warming up. It was about stretching. So you stretched a lot. And then you find out, well, if you static stretch too much, it's not really that good. You're not warming up your body as well as you can be. And it takes you some injuries to understand that. So then you start to warm up properly. You do more dynamic stuff, and, stuff that isn't necessarily stretching, but getting yourself prepared for battle, basically. And I think that went a long way in how I prepared to play. And, I came up with something that I would do your eyes are a big muscle. Like, you got to do something to warm them up. So then I started to incorporate, an eye warm up, where it was, it was staring off and quick rapid eye movements, and throwing racket balls, one eye closed, switching eyes. And so you just incorporate different ways along the way to help you warm up and prepare yourself to play.
Yeah, I was curious about that. I know a lot of goalies are turning to, I read an article because I'm a big Flyers fan. So I've been idolizing Carter Hart a bit the last few years, watching him come up through the ranks. Hopefully he's going to be the goalie of the future for us. But it was interesting. I read an article of like his preparation compared to Brian Elliott's, where he uses visual edge and a lot of different kind of eye trainer things. And Brian Elliott's like, yeah, I just threw a tennis ball off the wall. So it's interesting to hear different goalies' preparations. One of the other things I think always find interesting, did you have anything you did like after you got scored on just to I notice a lot of goalies have a routine, if they get scored on, they do something just to try to forget about it, that they always do the same no matter what.
Yeah, I really didn't do anything in particular after a goal was scored. I did something after every stoppage in play. So it was almost like a reset, and being scored on is basically a stoppage in play. So, I would basically want to break the game down into 5-minute segments. So make it as manageable as I possibly could, because looking at 5 minutes is a lot easier than looking at a complete 60 or 20 for that matter before you get a break. So I would always say to myself, okay, if there was a stoppage in play at at the 16-11 mark in the first period, or in any period, I would just say, okay, let's win this next minute and 11 seconds. So I was always just focusing on winning the next amount of time, win the next amount of time, win the next amount of time. And I thought that really helped kind of keep me in the moment, but not get too far ahead.
Right. Yeah, I think it's always fun to watch goalies, especially as a goalie. It's kind of exciting to see who does what. And obviously you see a lot, some goalies are a lot more superstitious than others. So speaking of differences, you played 3 years in the KHL to finish your career. What are a lot referred to the KHL as the second best league in the world. What are the biggest differences between playing in the NHL versus the KHL?
Well, the biggest difference for me was obviously getting acclimated to the rink size, but now they have, I think it's in their plan to come back to a normal NHL regulation size arena throughout the KHL, as far as I know anyways. That's the last I heard. But, acclimating myself to the Olympic size rink, it was kind of neat because it was something that I never really paid too much attention to until I had to. And so I really found that it actually helped my game. I was more of an aggressive goalie because of my size, and I had to be. Whereas in the Olympic size rink, I found that I could play a little bit more conservative. I wasn't chasing the game as much. And, you say that to some goalies and goalie coaches, and they'd be like, why are you ever chasing the game? But, if you get too far out and you're depending on aggressiveness, the way the puck is moved nowadays, the lateral puck movement, you could get torched pretty easily if you're out swimming. So it allowed me to change my game a little bit. It allowed me to harness my depth a little bit more, be really aware of where I was standing and why I was standing there. So it really kind of dumbed my game down for me, which helped me. The other obvious change and a difference in the KHL is it's Russia, and it's language barriers. It's learning to communicate with your teammates without necessarily knowing what they're saying. So that posed its own challenge in itself. But those 3 years, really eye-opening. Grateful for the experience, grateful for the opportunity to have been able to go there and play in a really good organization and with Locomotive, especially with their history of the team, but the recent history at that time with the plane crash and being part of a group of players that, were called upon to, be, kind of be a healing resource for that community and a rallying point at that particular time.
Absolutely. You mentioned obviously having 3 really good years there. Statistically, some of the best years of your career, especially the second one you had there. Did you guys, I don't know how far you made in the playoffs. You played a lot of playoff games and had like the best save percentage, but I'm not sure if you won or not. How did that season go?
It was a good season. It was a trying season. We had 2 coaching changes that year. My first year coach, Tom Moreau, came back for the start of that second year. And, it's not like we got off to a bad start, but it wasn't a start that I think was indicative of how talented our group was at that time. So there was a coaching change and the management brought in a Russian coach named Peter Vorobyev, historic Russian coach. Really, was an iron fist that maybe we needed at that point in time for our team to kind of turn around and start getting going in the direction that we knew we could. So he coached up until the break of the Olympics, and then I believe there might have been some health issues and some health reasons why he had to step down at that particular time. But I was back home here in Canada for that Olympic break, and I got a phone call, and it was Dave King, And he had just told me that he had been appointed the new coach of Locomotive. And it's funny because at that particular time of the season, we had 4 games left, and they were all home games, and we needed to win all 4 to make the playoffs.
Really?
So we were, we were kind of under the gun. We knew we were, like, statistic wise, I was having a great year, but it was tough, and to go back and win 4 straight games with another new coach, it was going to be tough, but we managed to pull it off. We were 8th seed. We beat the team in the first round that was the 2-time reigning KHL champions, Dynamo Moscow. Then we put out SKA St. Petersburg, who had Ilya Kovalchuk, Artemi Panarin. I can't even remember how many other guys they had, but they were stacked, they were loaded, and we managed to put them out. So, we started playing our best hockey at the right time. We're fortunate that we had the opportunity to play our best hockey at the right time, but that season ended in the 3rd round against Prague, who lost in Game 7 the championship series against a really good team coached by Mike Keenan. So, it was a really good season statistic wise, but I think the big takeaway was, was that dream playoff run that we had that didn't last long enough.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool story though, to win your last 4, making it as an 8th seed and make a run like that. It seems quite like the NHL, like the Kings did in, 2012 or something. So always cool to hear those stories. You had a pretty good year in Columbus before going over to the KHL. I believe, was that the NHL lockout year that you went over to the KHL? And did you stay over there because you had success? Or, obviously you're from North America, so you kind of went away from your family, I'm sure, brought them with you, and was a little bit different. So why did you choose to stay over in the KHL for 3 years?
Well, I think when I played that year in Columbus, I pretty much knew what I was in North America. And, as well as that season went, we weren't a particularly good team. We had really good parts, don't get me wrong, but we just couldn't find a way to kind of put it together. But I had a great goalie coach and great coaching staff, throughout that entire season. And, Ian Clark, who's one of the greats, if not maybe the greatest goalie coach, in the NHL right now. It's arguable, obviously, but, in my mind, being able to work with him in Columbus and in Vancouver, he did a lot for my game. Very appreciative of him. But I had no idea that there was going to be any type of work stoppage when I signed in Russia. However, I did sign in Russia because it was just like, listen, do I want to be a 32-year-old or 31-year-old that wants to wait till July 1st, grind it out, July 1, maybe get something, maybe not get something, where I had an opportunity to, really be, part of a group of players that what I said before, that could offer hope again to, really, a community that was really struggling. And I think that was a big reason why I wanted to do it. I had friends and ex-teammates that were on that plane, and, it wasn't a decision that was made lightly, but I knew at that time it was the right time to go, and I wasn't going to look back from it. And the reason why I stayed there was because the experience that it offered me, and what it also offered was a team whose management group, the coaching staff, the community really believed in us, and that felt really good too.
That's pretty special. Yeah, I can't argue with that one. So obviously now you've come back from your professional career, moved into player development role with the Comets and the Canucks organization. What do you think sets goalies apart from one another? Like today, is it the mental side of things, especially now since there's a lot of big, athletic, talented goalies who have the capability? Because it just seems to me that it's really the mental side that sets goalies apart more than anything else nowadays.
I agree with you, and it has to be. You get these giants that are coming out of Europe, out of North America. They're 6'4", they're 6'5", they're complete athletes, and it's what gives the guys that are 6 feet, 6'1", 6'2", that advantage over them is can I mentally play this game better? Can I mentally prepare for long seasons better? Can I mentally prepare in short periods of time better than guys that maybe have a better advantage athleticism wise over me, or height wise, or size wise, or whatever you want? It really is the differentiating factor, when it comes to the position. You have to be able to think the game. You have to be able to make saves. You have to be able to compete. And you just have to be able to be the difference that your team needs to be. And I don't think that's size dependent. I think that depends on the size of your heart. I think that depends on how you understand the game and how you understand the position.
Right. So what do you do as a coach, a goalie coach, when players are maybe a little bit older in the AHL who, have already been set in their ways to some extent? Do you work on certain things they want to work on, or do you kind of evaluate, what you think they need to work on? And how does that relationship work?
It's definitely different than working with the younger goalies. The younger goalies are still trying to figure out what it is they are as goalies. I think you have to help them. You almost have to be a caddy for them. You have to help them along their path. It's a partnership. You have to be there with them. You have to have their back. You have to be a sounding board. With the older guys, they have a good idea of what their game is, and they're really fun to work with. They want to be the old dog that can learn new tricks, which is awesome, because they don't want to be like, hey, listen, I know what I am, but I want to get better. And I think those guys that can still be creative and innovative within their own games, they last, and they're invaluable to have around, because, I think at some point they're going to be the guys that are in the mentoring positions, that are in the coaching positions. They're going to take that torch as well. And I think them being interested in wanting to be, impactful within their own game and their own careers, I think it's huge. And so that's what makes them really fun and exciting to work with, as well as the younger goalies.
So what's your role like? You said you go down there like half a month of the year, or of each month. What, on a day-to-day basis, what are you doing with each goalie?
So on a day-to-day basis, we're going to break down their video. We're going to break down their games. What we're working on in practice, or in terms of their current pathway, or where they are along their pathway for the particular season or maybe month. We want to see what we've introduced. We want to see what we're working on, but we also want to take away a lot of positive reinforcement through their game. Okay, this is what we're working on, but see that, like, it's starting to build in your game. It's starting to really, take root and grow. And so we just want to keep on throwing water on those seeds that we're planting in the off season and through the first part of the year, and kind of really, really grow and develop their game. So, they're learning what their game is along the way. So that's typically what I'm trying to do, and trying to just keep them in a really good headspace, keep their spirits up, really focus in on their body language, because, that says a lot as well as to where they're at. And when we get on the ice, we want to make best of the time that we have, and we get out there and we get right after it. They're expected to be on the ice and ready to go. And because there's no time to tiptoe into games, as soon as that puck drops, it's go time. So we want to approach our practices that way. And I think the goalies have fun with it. It's fresh. And I think they genuinely look excited to that, that 20 or 30 minutes that we get to spend on the ice together before practice, really honing the craft.
Right. I think you not specifically mentioned a player-goalie relationship, but I'm curious from your standpoint as a goalie who played in the NHL, what is the kind of goalie-player relationship? Is there anything, you asked of your players that helped you out as a goalie or anything like that?
I think, it's more what it's funny because what can the goalie do for the player? And, I think we're there to serve our players. I think we're leaderships, in our own way. We're leaders in our own way in that, we are the last line of defense, and, we have to shoulder a lot of the burden in the games, and that just comes with the territory. That comes with goaltending, and you just have to own that fact. But I think that, what I found was players really respect the goalie who goes out on the ice wanting to accomplish something in their own game, but the competitiveness that he practices with or she practices with, the players really feed off that, because now they know that you're not only invested in your game, you're invested in me getting better because you're making it hard for me. And I think that's where a lot of the camaraderie grows out of. And I don't want a guy coming in here and just taking muffins and at my glove side. I want him bearing down. I want him trying to score on me. And likewise, you're going to come down. You're going to shoot as hard as you can. You're going to try and pick me apart, and I'm going to do whatever I can to stop you because that's my job. So now you're feeding off each other. It raised the competitive spirit. It raised the competitive level within the team. And I think that's where strong team bonds are actually made.
Yeah, I talked to Mike Johnston not too long ago, a couple weeks ago. He talked about Marc-Andre Fleury in practices and just how he has that competitive nature in him, but he's kind of fun with it at the same time, but like challenges his teammates and really creates that bond that I think you're talking about. You mentioned younger goalies. One of the first things you said about you didn't have a specific goalie coach growing up. I'm actually a goalie myself, and I help coach a 7-year-old who just started playing goalie last year. What are some of the words of wisdom that you could offer to a younger goalie that wants to play at all the levels you have throughout your career?
Be a great skater, and it just never stops. Be a great skater in big areas, whereas your skating stride, you're actually skating like a player. Be a good forward skater. Be a good backward skater. Just know the proper skating technique. You don't need to be the best skater on your team, but you need to be a great skater, because that's what this game is built on. It's built on skating. If you can't skate, it doesn't matter which position you're trying to play. It's going to be difficult. So it's no different than goaltending. So first and foremost, basic skating. Be a really good basic skater, and then once you learn how to use those edges, control those edges in that manner, now you can really confine the space and make it really goalie specific, and then be great at goalie specific skating. So you've got to be able to, C-cut with balance. You've got to be able to rotate with balance. You've got to be able to, T-push with balance. You got to be able to shuffle with balance. You got to be able to do everything with balance. So that's what your skating is what is going to pave the way for your complete experience, whether it's going to be a positive one or whether it's going to be one that it's going to take you to a certain extent, and then you're going to get to a certain point and you might not be able to get past that point. But if you keep on continually, getting better at skating, you never know where that's going to take you, but that's the big one. Just be a great skater.
Absolutely. I have heard a lot of people say that. So that's one thing I've told the 7-year-old I work with is he likes goalies so much that he doesn't want to skate out as much. And he's only been playing hockey for about 3 years now. And I told him it's like, you want to keep working on your skating too, because that's going to make you a better goalie. Like they intertwine. So I'm trying to put that in his head. It's a little tough for a 7-year-old who just wants to be a goalie someday to understand that, but it's a work in progress. So I'm going to use those words you just said to try to help him out. Is there anything, I know here it's kind of an issue just because, we are in a smaller market than some and don't have a ton of goalie resources. And what a lot of times I see in practices, goalies are just taking random shots or kind of just on their own. What are some things that coaches, even though they might not know about goaltending, that they can help the progression of their goalies?
Well, I think I think it really comes down to, like, are you talking about, a goalie coach coaching goalies, or just your regular hockey coach that, working with a goalie on the side type of thing?
Yes. So unfortunately, we don't have a ton of goalie coaches. People try to get out and help when they can, but there's not a ton of goalie specific coaches. So I see a lot of just regular coaches who may not know a whole lot about goaltending, kind of just leave their goalies out to dry a little bit. What can they do to really help their goalies progress?
Well, I think it's just one thing is just to flag down someone, and maybe it's a brief, 5-10 minute conversation. Just give me a couple things, write down a couple things, or explain to me a couple of drills that I can do to work on. Because like you said, a lot of minor hockey coaches, haven't played the position. It's no fault of their own. But they want to put as much punch into that 1 hour and 10 minutes of ice time that they can, so that their players are getting all these reps and being able to take all these shots. And, and again, to no fault of their own, sometimes the goalies are left out there and they're just targets, whereas they really want to be a goalie. They want to learn how to play their position just as much as a defenseman, just as much as a forward. So I think trying to find a way to, cater to the goalie's needs as well in each drill, whether it's something, give the goalie something, it's not just there for rapid fire, allow them to go through save progressions, allow them to execute save process, as fully as they can, without being, throwing 5 pucks at a time, basically. But it's hard work. It takes a lot of practice planning. It takes a lot of, sitting down with someone such as yourself, like I said earlier. And I think the easiest thing to do is just keep it simple. You don't need to know a lot, but, as long as you can take a goalie aside and work on some simple skating drills with them, whether it's, okay, we're gonna come over the side, let's do an iron cross that's going to incorporate some shuffling, some T pushing, some C cutting, but let's work on, let's stay balanced, let's keep your shoulders back, let's keep your chin down. It just little reminders that they can do, and it doesn't have to be brain surgery, just simple stuff.
The other thing I get asked about is things you can work on off the ice. Is there anything you would recommend goalies work on that's easy they could do at home to work on off the ice?
I think that's age specific, but I think the easiest thing to do is we want to have good hands. And I think if you're playing catch, if you're playing football, if you're playing lacrosse, you're playing toss with the lacrosse ball, or with your dad or with your brother or with your sister or whoever. I think having a great set of hands and having your eyes and hands being able to work together, I think that goes incredibly far. I think in terms of some feet drills, get out a ladder drill. Get out a ladder and do some ladder drills. Something that's really short, really explosive, really kind of position specific. You're working in, you're not working for 8 seconds or 10 seconds at a time skating down the rink. You're working for 1 or 2 seconds and then you get to rest. So do explosive stuff that, is going to mimic how you play in your small area.
Right. I always like to ask this question, especially to players who have played a lot of games and have a lot they have to think about on this question. So kind of a fun little question to finish off. You can answer, you can give multiple answers if you wish, just because I know it's hard to pick one, but what is your favorite hockey memory that you'll just never forget?
Oh, geez, that is a good one. There's so many, right? My favorite hockey memory, this could go in so many different directions, actually. My favorite hockey memory would have been my first career NHL start against the Dallas Stars. And I can't even give you the date, but I remember Marty Turco was in the other net. And I remember looking up and, Kirk Muller was on that Dallas team. Mike Medana was flying around, Darian Hatcher, Richard Mapp. It was such a fun time. And then, you forget the guys that are on your team, like Al McInnes, Barrett Jackman, Keith Kachuk, Doug Waite, Scott Young, Corey, the names go on and on, but just that first start, it's something that you never forget, because it's the one thing that you're always working towards as a young player. I know in Canada, every kid that straps on the skates and straps on the pads, their goal is to play in the NHL. And that first start was, that was the one for me.
Culmination of everything to know you made it. You did something right.
Yeah, exactly. Just to be able to, play in the NHL and, and it's no matter if it was just for one game or whatever, that was, it's something that you work towards for, all those years.
Right. I'm curious. I kind of thought of this. You mentioned about one game, so I'm going to ask you one more question. What are your thoughts about the emergency backup goalies in the NHL? Because it's something that was brought up with the David Ayers thing. What's your thoughts on that sort of thing?
It's such, I think the idea is great. I think those stories, the Scott Foster story, the David Ayers story, I think those are just, those are folklore stories. Those are going to go down in history books, right? Those things happened. It's real. It happened. And I think having the e-bug, I think it's a great idea. They're probably going to revisit it, I would imagine. I can't speak for anybody, but in the back of my mind, it's just thinking they're probably going to do something about this. They're going to revise it somehow, but I think they're phenomenal stories. I think you look at the guys on the bench for those winning teams, those Carolina guys. They probably never played harder in their entire lives, and they got in front of the guy, and it was a bringing together of, again, it was another rallying point. It was the same thing with Scott Foster a couple years back in Chicago. I just think they're phenomenal stories, and I think it's really cool.
Right. Not to discount David Ayers in any way, but I got a notification on my phone that he was coming in, and I was like, oh, I got to watch this. And I turned it on, and I don't think I've ever seen Carolina play any better than I did. I was like, wow, these guys can really turn it up if they needed to. And it was So yeah, but like you said, I think it's just so different than any other sport. It's kind of brought out a bunch of new. The casual fans kind of came out and was like, "Oh, that's such a cool deal." I think it's just good for hockey. But yeah, I heard lots of different people say some negative things about it. So I was curious what you think the future of it might be.
Yeah, well, who knows what the future of it's going to be? But I think we're always looking for cool stories, and they definitely provided that.
Right. Well, Curtis, I certainly appreciate your time. Thank you so much. As a fellow goalie, I'm excited that you were able to join us as our first goalie, and hopefully many to come.
You bet, Nick. All the best to you, and keep on working with those guys there and making them as best they can become.
Yes, thank you so much, and we'll certainly be sharing your words of wisdom.